Hello, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Keegan, and welcome back to the channel, and welcome back to a different side of Supercoach video for 2020. Before we get underway, make sure to like this video and subscribe so you don't miss any of the Supercoach videos on this channel. And without any further ado, let me talk to you about what I'm thinking about talking about today. So as you can see, probably behind me, behind the team, you can see two things. Firstly, you can see the new Supercoach setup and the new interface, and it looks pretty good. Do I like it better than last year's? I don't know. I think I like last year's better. I do prefer, and this sounds really I like the sort of the grassy look on the background from memory, and all that sort of stuff. This setup looks a bit generic, a bit amateurish, but I still think it looks pretty clean, it looks pretty cut, it looks pretty easy to use, so I'm pretty happy with that. And the second thing that you can probably notice as well is I've picked it all full of Suns players, and the reason I'm going to do that today is because this video is all about talking you through some of the Gold Coast Suns players that might be having an impact in your Supercoach this year. Now, the reason I've chosen the Gold Coast Suns is basically because I support them, so I can pretty much talk about any of these players without having to write down a bunch of stats or write down a bunch of things you need to remember for each player. I can pretty much talk about these players without having to worry about it too much. So I thought, why not? Let me give you some insights about some players you might want to think about including. Hint, there's probably not a lot I'd recommend this year, but there might be one or two that might be of interest and might be some points of difference that you might want to look at heading into the year. Anyway, let's have a look at the team. Let's start from the defense. We'll work our way forward, and let's get on talking about the Gold Coast Suns. So, looking at the team, there's some interesting players. Now, I'll tell you now, the Gold Coast has probably one of the biggest lists ever assembled in AFL. I think they've got about 50 plus players, including senior list, rookie list, and Category B rookies. Now, the Category B rookies can't play AFL. They can only play... so the Category B rookies can play AFL. We've got two players on scholarships. They can't play AFL. They can only play NEFL, and I don't think they would... Even if they were able to play AFL, they probably wouldn't be. They're probably too far down the ladder. But we've got a huge amount of players on our list, and that makes a really, really interesting proposition because with a young team, we're probably going to get young players getting tired. Other players are probably going to come in and fill roles. So I think that there's a chance a lot of these players could get used at some point. Whether they're Supercoach relevant or not remains to be seen. But let's look through the team. I've just basically picked the highest costing players in every line, and then I'm going to talk about them. And maybe some ones you should consider, ones you should definitely avoid, and ones that are completely irrelevant to Supercoach. So looking from the back line, our most expensive defender is Lachie Weller. Now, I actually think Lachie Weller is worth the look. Now, people are going to always look at he was pick 2, he hasn't lived up to the hype. And he probably hasn't, but this year he's actually been training with the midfield. So he's been training through the midfield with the Suns to give us that burst, that speed, and that kicking accuracy out of the guts. So I think he might be one that might be worth a look at, maybe in the preseason, seeing where he lines up. Because if he does start lining up in the midfield, he will be the person that will be looking to distribute the ball, much like an Ellis, who I'll talk about a bit later. They're looking through training and seeing a couple of training videos here and there. Weller and Ellis are sort of almost standing as almost quarterbacks, where they're sort of standing 5 meters off the pack, whether it's behind the pack or to the side of the pack. And then the in and under players like a Swallow, like a Greenwood, looking to be getting the ball, getting it out, and getting Weller and Ellis on the end and looking to move it forward. So I think that Weller is definitely a point of interest, and one you should probably at least consider. Whether you go with him or not is completely up to you. Would I be going with him? Probably not. But he's one that, if he performs well and he plays for the midfield for the majority of the 2 preseason games, he's someone you probably could consider, especially at 481. He's not quite your top premium, but if he gets midfield minutes and he gets midfield touches and midfield disposal levels, then he could push his way up there. Hanley, I had Hanley at the start of last year, I think, or the year before. He gets too injured. He burnt me too much. When he plays pretty well and he gets a bit of the ball, but I don't think he's someone you want to be considering for the Suns, or for your Supercoach, sorry. And even for the Suns, I think by the end of the year, he probably won't be playing. Someone like a Jez McLennan, who I talked about in our Defenders series, His defenders episode last video, he'll be replaced by Jez McLennan, I imagine, by the end of the season. So I don't think Hanley's someone you probably want to be looking at putting any money into, in my opinion. Harbrow's an interesting one. He won our best and fairest last year, and he didn't win our best and fairest last year. He ran our best and fairest the year before. Last year, Witts won it. But I think Harbrow, if fit, he's gonna play every game for us. He's gonna get an absolutely bucket load of the ball because, let's be honest, the ball's probably gonna be in our defence for a fair amount of the time. So I think Harbrow is one worth considering. And I think I did start with Harbrow last year, and he did okay. He hits your 80s and your 85s, which is good. But he's not to the level of you want your 90 pluses and your 95 pluses in defence consistently. So he'll have the odd game where he'll go 110, 120, but then he'll have a game or two where he'll hit a 70 or a 60 and you throw your arms up and go, why did I pick him? So Harbrow's a very outside chance. I probably wouldn't be picking him. But again, he's someone you might want to consider if you want a bit of a point of difference. Collins is a lockdown defender. He's going to take a lot of intercept marks. He should be fit this year. He sort of finished last year pretty early because he had a hip issue. He's basically rehabbed it. He seems to be playing in match simulation at training, so he's going to play. He's probably not going to get a lot of the ball, so I probably wouldn't consider him in my team. Jesse Joyce is the same. He's a lockdown sort of small defender. He's a good kick, but doesn't get enough of it, so I wouldn't bother with him. Ballard's an interesting one. He can rack up marks, and he's usually pretty good disposal. There's a couple of times last year where his kicking was absolutely atrocious. But Ballard is someone that I would probably not consider. Again, 325 is an awkward price for a player in your team, for one that's not guaranteed to deliver. I reckon this year will actually go really well, and I reckon he'll definitely have a breakout year for the Suns. Whether that happens in Supercoach as well, I don't think that's going to happen, but worth looking at. Murdoch is another one, probably not even going to be playing. He's going to be in and out of the team this year. 319,000 is not worth really looking at. He's sort of a bit part player. Dawson's the exact same. Even though Dawson last year he had a really good game where I think against the Pies at the MCG, where he got spanked by 60 points, 70 points, or whatever it was. He had like 15, 16 marks playing out of the back pocket. Basically what we did was just kicking it from pocket, fullback, pocket, back to the fullback, and basically did that, and he racked up 15, 16 marks. So he had a good... Towards the end of the year, he actually turned a corner and looked like a decent player. Again, not the Supercoach, probably. That's probably more related to the Suns in general, but I don't reckon I would not be picking Dawson for Supercoach at all. And just before we move on, this little feature has been really handy as well, is looking for players at the moment and seeing... You can filter by dual position, watch list, recommended, running hot, form drops. There's a really good filter system. It looks a bit basic, like they could dossy up a bit instead of just having black text on a white background, like actually have proper buttons. But it's a really, really good way, and it's good for me for this video at least, because I can just filter by Suns and I can go through the rest of them for you. So looking down here, other Suns that I haven't included, there's an absolute list here. I'll quickly fly through them. Honch, much like Collins, intercept player, he only get the ball 10, 15 touches a game, not worth it. Corey Ellis, probably not going to be playing a lot for us. He had a few chances last year to really establish himself in the team, didn't, so I don't think you'll be seeing much of him this year. Lukosius is an interesting one. He's going to play defence majority of this year. From what's being told, he's going to be almost the distributor out of the back line. He'll probably play 22 games, but he's a wait and see to whether he gets the ball enough. I don't think he will. I think he'll get your 15, 20, which is good for a second-year player, but I don't think he's Supercoach relevant. Burgess, he'll play most of the year in the NAFL unless there's an absolutely huge amount of injuries. Hall and Smith's exactly the same. Rory Thompson, for our system, it'll be amazing to have him back because he's our best lockdown defender. He's quick, he's tall, he can spoil. He's not a great kick, but that's all right. He knows his limitations. He usually takes the easy kick or the easy handball. But yeah, not Supercoach relevant. Caleb Graham, definitely not. Jez McLennan, as I mentioned last video, so if you go back to the last video, I did talk a bit about Jez McLennan. I won't repeat myself too much, but I will say he's going to be a player that I reckon by the end of the year he'll be getting games, so he might be an upgrade target or a downgrade target come mid-season or towards the end of the season, where the Suns will probably be out of finals contention. So they might be looking to play a few younger players to get them a bit of game time. He might be one that might come in for the last 5 or 6 rounds, and if you're looking for a good downgrade target, he could be that for you. And Luke Towie is an Irish import on the rookie list. He probably won't play this year, so irrelevant. All right, let's move on to the midfield now, and let's have a look at what we've got going. So looking at our midfield here, so Swallow, probably not going to be relevant, does an amazing job for us, great captain, just leads by example. He can go forward and kick a few goals, but he's not Supercoach relevant. He'll probably, if we look at we can look at the stats, his break even is like, his average is, his 83 is what he's been predicted to get. And that's probably his thing, is he probably will get between 80 and 90 every week, but for a midfield player, that's not good enough in Supercoach. For us as a club, we need him, we love him, he's big in the midfield for us, and he provides that leadership, so we're pretty happy with that. Fiorini's an interesting one, actually, and he's probably the first one, along with probably Lockie Weather, that I would definitely consider. He's due a breakout year. He gets a lot of the ball. Prediction-wise, he actually predicted to get 99 in the first game against Port Adelaide. So I think he's definitely worth a look at. He probably doesn't make your final team, but he's definitely someone in consideration if you're looking for a point of difference player through the midfield. He gets an absolute bucket load of the ball. He can kick a goal or two in a game as well. So for him to sort of really step up would be getting 30 plus touches a game and also kicking a goal or two, and that will see his price rise right up. He's not really that quick. His disposal's pretty good. He's not a long kick. He's a very sort of a workman-like player that doesn't have a lot of tools, but he has a lot of hard work, and he can sort of bob up for that goal every now and then, which is great. Ellis is a new recruit. He's another one that you could consider. I personally probably wouldn't. But again, like Lockie Weller, as I mentioned, he'll play predominantly on a wing. He'll basically, one wing of Metricon will just be the Ellis wing, where I reckon Stewie G is going to say, all right, this is your area, you stand here, you're always the get out, and he'll just run hard for us all day, up and back, up and back, up and back. Probably won't convert well to Supercoach because he'll have to hit targets, and our forward line is pretty average. Ben King's a second-year player, while looks really promising, is just a second-year player, so we don't want to leave too much to him. And Peter Wright is inconsistent, so I don't think Ellis is probably someone you want to consider, but again, you never know. He might bob up during the season and turn to be a really good player in a new club. Who knows? Hugh Greenwood. Now, this is probably the first interesting one that I would consider for my own team, only because you can actually play him in the forward line. Here he's in the midfield, just the way it's sort of sorted out. I would consider picking him for the forward line. He's probably going to play a majority of the time in our midfield because we just lack those really big bodies. Swallow and Greenwood and Miles are probably our 3, and Miller. So there's 4. We've probably got 4 good inside mids, and you could throw Brody in there as well, who are probably going to be doing bulk of the grunt work in there, getting it out for the likes of Weller and Ellis. So Greenwood will be looking to I reckon the club will be looking to put him into the middle the majority of the time, and then he can go forward and kick a goal too. As he's been shown at the Crows, he can kick a fair few goals when he's given the chance. So I would think he's probably in consideration for my forward line, definitely. I probably wouldn't play him in the midfield, but he gives you that dual position flexibility where if you desperately need to put him in the midfield for a game, for some reason, you have the option of that. So, good player. One I would consider definitely for my forward line, probably not so much for my midfield. And that's my opinion. Miller, he gets a bit of the ball. His disposal's questionable at times, and I love him. I love him a bit. So I love Tuke Miller a bit. He has leadership pouring from his veins, which is exactly what we need in the club. He's such a good young leader. He's the vice captain in the club, so very important. Supercoach, probably not that relevant. Outside, he's slimmed down a fair bit apparently from all reports, so maybe that means he's a bit quicker because he's not the quickest, but he can tackle. He's in and under hard, and he gets a lot of hard ball, but he's probably going to be used as more of a tagger, and as a tagger, he's probably not going to see a lot of the ball. He'll get a lot of tackles probably, but getting his own ball might be a problem. Miles, I started him last year. He was okay. He didn't really blow anyone away, so I didn't really bother anymore with him. And at 455,000, with what's he need? What does he need to? What's his break even's 84. He might hit 84. I'm not 100% sure there, but who knows. Reardon, young player, will get a run this year, I reckon. Look good in the NAFL. He gets the ball. He has that really explosive pace coming out of the pack. In the NAFL and the AFL, it's very, very different. But if he could attribute that, he could be a young midfielder that, like McLennan, could get a look towards the end of the year as young bodies get tired and get a look. Sharp, probably one of the more controversial draft picks for the Suns, trading away that pick 10 next year for a look at Sharp this past draft period. I probably don't see him really affecting this year unless he absolutely rips it up, because he'll be playing on a wing and Ellis will be playing on a wing. So Ellis, for me anyway, Ellis will be playing on one wing, and then on the other wing you'll have Powell and Sharp probably vying for that other wing position at the moment. Powell has the runs on the board, he's a good runner, he gets 40, can kick a goal, so he would be ahead of Sharp at the moment, but who knows. Sharp will get a look in at the preseason, I reckon he'll get a few minutes, so who knows, he might surprise. We've got Anderson. He'll play. He'll probably play more forward, I reckon. I don't think he's going to play much through the midfield for us. His mate Rao will probably play through the midfield a lot more than he will. He'll probably play for half-forward flank, and he might even snag a couple of goals. So at 202, he's probably a bit overpriced for a rookie pick, but he's definitely worth considering anyway if looking at your higher-end sort of rookies. Flanders is more likely for me to be picked than Anderson, just because he's a bit cheaper and he has that dual position as well. He can be picked as a mid or a forward, and I think he will probably play that midfield forward position where he might do a little bit of midfield, but he, like Anderson, will probably play majority of the time in the forward line, and I reckon he will look to probably play most of the games this season, so I reckon he's a decent pick. Whether how he scores or not will be interesting for Supercoach. His break-even's 30, so he'll probably get over that for a couple of weeks. Whether there's probably better options at that price, or better options even be below that price that you might want to go to other than Flanders, but he's definitely worth consideration for one of your rookie spots. Fletcher he's an in and under player, plays prominently NAFL. He was not a compensation pick. The picks you can have, I can't remember what they're exactly called, but it's the picks you can get before the start of the season. So Thompson went down with an ACL last year in February, so we were able to pick another player up and put them on our list as a supplementary player. That's what it was called, and that was Fletcher for us. And he's a good inside mid. He buffets the ball. He does really well in the NAFL. His kicking's a bit average, and he probably won't have any Supercoach ramifications. So actually, I seem to have really missed a few there that we can definitely talk about now. Brody, potential to be breakout. His fitness is just the only question mark over him. He has good size, he has good hands, but whether he can go for 4 quarters is a question. He's like a player that can go really hard for 3 quarters, in that 4th quarter he's absolutely gassed. But if he can get that fitness level up, I think he's a pretty good player. Bose will be a gun. Like, he only played 15 games last year. He was injured. He had some absolutely great moments. Probably the best one was that goal against Carlton to win the game for us. And I reckon he takes that next step next year. This season coming up. I don't think he's going to be worth the 411,000 that he's worth. So I wouldn't be picking him up. But one to watch maybe for next year. He could, once building, he could be 2021. He could definitely be a player that you could pick confidently. Ainsworth's probably the same though at 329,000. Ainsworth has that dual position as well. He's a forward and a mid. He will kick goals. His leap for a small forward is really, really good. As he builds that tank, he has that sort of touch of class that our midfield does need, and he can go in there from time to time. And he's definitely got the talent. Hopefully this year, I think this is their 4th year. His 4th year on the list. And with that, in that 4th year, hopefully it means that he can start putting some runs on the board as his body's becoming accustomed to AFL football. Powell, as I mentioned, relevant, not Supercoach relevant, will play on the wing, will probably play a few games. Was a good pick last year, but this year wouldn't bother. Lemons, who I've picked in the forward line, I'll talk about him then. Hall and Smith I've already spoken about. Rowell is the one that will definitely be on my team. He will play 22 games if his body allows him to. He will start in the middle. He will get a lot of ball. He's the tip for the rising star, and there's little doubt why. Looking at his under 18s, and the Suns sound really wrapped with him. So I think you'll see Rao definitely be part of a lot of teams in Supercoach, and he'll definitely score well for the Suns as well. So definitely someone I would definitely be considering for one of those higher price rookie spots on your team. And Butterick down here, rookie, young, probably not going to really be relevant, but one for the future to keep an eye on. All right, looking at the rucks, this should be quick. Wits, I would have considered Wits until recently. He's hurt his foot or his ankle, or he hurt something, and basically what that's meant is he's had to go for some minor surgery. He's currently on crutches and in a moon boot. He's expected to play round 1, but the injury, that sort of injury really sort of, not worries, but it sort of makes me question whether I would pick him for round 1. So I probably wouldn't pick him at the moment. He still, if he gets fit, he definitely will have a massive impact, but injuries like that, you're sort of a bit worrisome on, so I probably wouldn't pick him. If the Wits injury is pretty more severe than first thought, which as a Suns fan I hope it's not, but if it is, it means Zach Smith is pretty much going to get a full run at it. He's brought up back from the Cats, started out with us, back from Geelong. He's pretty much come up with the expectation he's probably going to be playing mostly knee full unless Wits needs a break or gets injured. For Smith's, not luck, but Smith's coincidence, Wits looks injured. Now, whether he plays round 1 or not, Smith might actually get a look at it. And if the injury is probably worse than first thought, Smith might get 5, 6, 7 rounds look at it. And at 254,000, he might be worth someone you might want to put on your bench as someone that could increase in price potentially. So he's one to keep it. So basically, for Smith, keep an eye on Wits. If Wits doesn't play, I would actually really think Smith on the bench might be an option or a consideration. There might be better selections at that for that bench spot. I'm not sure, but one that you might want to consider. Conroy, probably not a massive issue. Do we even have any other people on the rucks? I don't think we do. No, our 3 rucks there. So yeah, pretty much that. All right, let's go to our forward line. All right. So let's have a look at the people here first. Sam Day, key forward, can be a bit flaky, kicks a lot of goals. What am I saying? So, kicks a lot of goals sometimes. You'll have a game where he'll kick 4, and then you'll have 3 games where he kicks none. So, consistency is not his thing, so I wouldn't be picking him up. Wright's the same. Again, he'll have games where he'll lead up, he'll take 8 or 9 marks, he'll kick a couple of goals, and then just go missing. So, not someone I would consider either. Holman, injured, so he's on our list. He's a good when he's up and going. He's injured over the summer. Again, not Supercoach relevant, so I wouldn't worry about him too much. Sexton, 297. He was our leading goal kicker last year. He kicked 40 goals. I want to say have a look at it. With our team getting better, he might actually kick a few more goals. But he's a small forward in a pretty poor team, so his scoring is very limited, so I probably wouldn't consider him. But I think he's worth more than 297,000 in my opinion. King, 225,000 is probably not a bad price for him, but I reckon you're better off picking his brother than him, because they're probably going to be in the same sort of development, even though Ben King's played 13, 14 games. But for a rookie forward, he'll play every game if he's fit. Again, he's signed up to a contract for another 3 years. I think he's locked in for another 3 years at least. So he'll play every game. We'll put time into him. So he will play games. But whether and again, as with Sexton, a small forward in a struggling team, a key forward in a struggling team as well, he'll only get limited looks at it. But who knows? Now, Rankin is someone that I definitely would consider putting in your team, and I reckon he would be on a lot of benches already, ready to go for the season. Pick 3 last year, had really serious, chronic, reoccurring, whatever word you want to use, hamstring problems. I wouldn't be sure that he's going to fill in a key role in our midfield. But he'll play forward and he'll probably have spurts in the midfield. And at 123,000, I reckon he's worth a pick. He'll kick goals. He'll definitely tackle. He'll do all the stuff a good small forward will do. Whereas Sexton's problem is he's probably too overpriced for a small forward and he probably won't have enough impact. Rankin's cheap enough that small forward stats, tackles, goals, and a bit of a run through the midfield mean he probably will do well for you, at least for the first half of the season. He might hit a wall at that point where you might want to trade him out. But I reckon for the first half of the season, Rankin's definitely worth a pick. He'll play every game. McPherson, interesting player. 443,000. He actually went under the radar of a lot of sort of people in the AFL. He actually had a really good year for us. A lot of handballs, a lot of kicks, a lot of tackles. His impact, he's not the best with the ball, so he can lose his head a bit. A lot of silly free kicks he can give away, but I probably wouldn't consider him for Supercoach, but who knows? As a forward, he might be. There are worse options, but I probably wouldn't be picking him. Lemons is interesting. He's another one that, as along with McPherson, has that forward mid flexibility. Probably not. Juju loves him. He's hard at the ball, but he's not a great kick. He doesn't get a lot of it. He is quick. He's fast. He's good for breakaway pace, but he just doesn't get enough of the ball to do those scores that you need for Supercoach. And looking at the rest of the forward line, I might have talked about most of them. Hugh Greenwood I've already talked about. Corbett, one as I haven't talked about, probably won't. He was slated for such big things at the start of the season. He has great hands. He's a great mark, but his goal kicking was poor last year. He could have done a lot better, and he just didn't take his chances. So he'll probably start the season out of the AFL team. But I don't reckon he's relevant for Supercoach. Heron, again, not relevant for Supercoach. I don't know. I think he's very lucky to still be on the list, in my opinion, of course, but not someone that I would probably be starting in Supercoach. Schoenfeld, like Heron, the same. These guys have been on lists for 3 or 4 years, and their prices really tell you that they haven't really done a hell of a lot, and I don't think they're going to continue to do a hell of a lot. So I reckon they just sit on the bench. For our late pick last year, probably not going to be relevant this year for Supercoach, so I wouldn't bother. Murtagh, again, someone that probably isn't going to be relevant, and Rosas is another two very young players. Probably neither are going to be Supercoach relevant for your team. Now, that is the list. I probably talked a bit more about them as players and didn't really mention them. I sort of juggled it between mentioning them as actual AFL players and mentioning them as Supercoach. So if you're here just for the Supercoach stuff, I'm sorry I ranted a little bit, but it's just sort of giving you a bit of insight into some of the thinking around players. As far as if I was to give like a golden pick or a player that I would from the Suns that I'd definitely consider for your team that isn't Raul or Rankin, because they're the two really obvious ones that probably will fit into most teams, it would be Hugh Greenwood. I reckon he's definitely worth a gamble at 463,000 in your forward line. Make sure he's in your forward line because he's going to play majority midfield this year. So he's definitely one I would definitely be the Sun that you could look at to be a high scorer for you this season. Well, guys, that's my look at the Gold Coast Suns list to do with Supercoach. I hope you enjoyed it. Let me know in the comments below if you agree or disagree with my picks. The Suns are a very low supported team, so not a lot of people have some insight. So hopefully you enjoyed some insight on some players you probably have never heard of. But if you do get a chance to watch the Suns this year, please do it because they're an exciting team and they're on the up and up. They might not get a lot of wins, but I'm hoping that they're at least a bit more competitive. And I reckon there's a couple of players, Supercoach players, that could be decent for you. Weller's interesting. Hugh Greenwood's an interesting pick. Raul and Rankin are probably the two that you definitely put in your team. And there's a few there that are interesting, but a lot of them are very irrelevant to your Supercoach team. So you probably won't be seeing too many Suns players in a lot of your teams or a lot of opponents' teams this year. But there's a few players there definitely worth considering as well. Well, guys, that's it for this video. This week, I'm recording this on a Sunday, so next week I'm probably going to be looking to do the midfield version of looking at players worth considering. So I did defenders last week, I did this video, and then I'm going to do midfielders this week. I'm just trying to string out some Supercoach content when it's a bit Supercoach information in January is a bit dire. So I'm I'm trying to put a bit of content together. If there's any other teams you maybe want me to look at, so I probably won't be able to do all 18. I don't think I've got the time or really the patience or the knowledge to do all 18. But if you want me to have a look at another team like this, where I go through each player on the list and go, yes, 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 no, yes, let me know in the comments below and I can have a look at doing that team. It probably require me to do a bit more research. I'm lucky for the Suns. I know a lot of the players. I know most of the players, pretty much what they're capable of, or at least what I think they're capable of, and I can talk about them pretty freely. So let me know in the comments below if you want to see another video like this. As always, guys, thank you for watching. I really do appreciate it. I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you later.